How far will something travel as it accelerates? So let's think about this for a second. If we have a car and it's accelerating at 10 meters per second squared, that means that every second it's going to be going 10 meters per second faster. If it's starting from rest, its final velocity after 1 second would be 10 meters per second, which means it will travel 10 meters every second after that time if it doesn't accelerate any further. Well, let's say that it continues to accelerate at 10 meters per second squared. That means that after the second, its final velocity will be 20 meters per second, which means that it will travel 20 meters for every second after that. So if an object is accelerating, its distance is going to be increasing by the square of its seconds. The rate of change of distance is also changing as you accelerate. So we want to look at our distance equation, and this is what we would use if a question says, how far did an accelerating car travel? So we've got d equals 0.5 at squared. D is for distance, 0.5 is just a constant, a stands for acceleration, and t stands for our time, which we're going to square. So knowing our PEMDAS rules, the first thing we would do is we would square the time. That means we would multiply it by itself. Our second step, we would multiply that value by its acceleration. And the final step, we would multiply by 0.5. So let's look at an example. A dragster has an acceleration of 8.0 meters per second squared. If it accelerates from rest for 10 seconds, how far will it travel? So the first thing we'll do is we'll write down our equation that answers how far. So distance equals 0.5 at squared. D in the equation stands for the distance, and that's what we're trying to solve for. A in the equation stands for the acceleration, which for this question is 8.0 meters per second squared. And T stands for the time, which for this question is 10 seconds. Now we'll plug our numbers into our equation. So our distance will equal 0.5 times 8.0 meters per second squared times 10.0 seconds squared. The first thing we'll do is we'll square our time. So D equals 0.5 times 8.0 meters per second squared times 10 times 10, which equals 100. But we're not only squaring the number, we're also squaring the unit. So we're going to end up with seconds squared. And when you look at the units, seconds squared are going to cancel out. So our next step, we're going to take our time squared and multiply it by our acceleration. So D equals 0.5 times 800 meters, since our second squared cancels out. And in our last step, we're going to multiply by 0.5, so the distance equals 400 meters. So if a dragster is accelerating at 8.0 meters per second squared for 10 seconds, it will have traveled 400 meters. Again, when we do these problems, make sure that you first start by writing down what equation answers your question. In this case, the question is how far. pick out the values out of the problem and write them out as your variables. Plug them into the equation. You're going to square your time, multiply it by your acceleration, and then multiply it by 0.5 to get your answer.